The first time I understood something was truly, deeply wrong was the day I walked into my apartment and caught a faint trace of my mother's perfume, soft, floral, unmistakable. She had been inside again. My parents treated my apartment like it was just an extension of my childhood bedroom, slipping in whenever they wanted, moving my belongings, leaving meals, behaving as if my adult life still belonged to them. I replaced the locks. I begged. I yelled. Nothing made a difference. So I did the only thing I could think of. I moved without giving them my new address and let the silence do the rest. But when they finally discovered the truth, it didn't happen the way I imagined. My name is Jennifer, and for most of my life, I believed that being a good daughter meant never pushing back. I grew up just outside Portland, in a quiet neighborhood where my parents, Marilyn and Edward, defined love as constant oversight. They hovered over every decision, corrected every mistake, monitored every movement, firmly convinced they always knew better. Very early on, I learned that privacy wasn't something I owned, it was something they allowed only when it suited them. When I moved into my first downtown apartment at 26, I really thought I had escaped the old dynamic. Clean walls, sunlight drifting through the blinds, traffic humming below, a fresh start. On the day I moved in, Marilyn asked for a spare key, in case there was ever an emergency, gently brushing my hair like I was still a teenager. I hesitated, but guilt rose up like it always did, and I handed it over. I didn't realize I had also surrendered my peace of mind. For a few weeks, everything felt normal. I settled into my job, added decor little by little, spent weekends at the cafe around the corner. I felt lighter. But then small signs started appearing, a blanket folded differently than I left it, dishes washed and put away in spots I never used, the faint residue of my mother's lotion clinging to the air hours after I'd come home. Soon she began leaving food, casseroles, soups, cookies, each with a cheerful note attached. You're always working. Eat something real. Love you. The handwriting was tender. The trespass was not. And my father backed her on everything. In their eyes, my independence wasn't real, it was a phase I'd eventually snap out of. But the worst part wasn't the break-ins themselves. It was how familiar the feeling was. Suddenly, I was a child again, watching Marilyn reorganize my backpack because my way was messy. I remembered the sting of being told my reactions were exaggerated, my boundaries ungrateful. Love from them always had strings attached, access, obedience, surrender. I tried explaining my feelings softly, then firmly, then with barely controlled frustration. Nothing changed. If anything, they grew more certain they were doing the right thing, convinced they were helping me in ways I was too emotional to appreciate. I wanted to believe their intentions were good. I wanted to believe I was safe. But the truth I had pushed aside for years was finally impossible to ignore. My parents didn't just disrespect boundaries, they didn't believe I was entitled to set any. The intrusions didn't stop. They intensified. At first, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe I moved that cup myself. Maybe I left that cabinet open. But denial only holds until the evidence becomes undeniable. One Wednesday evening, I came home to find my laundry folded neatly on my bed, socks paired, shirts smoothed, each item stacked with the unmistakable precision of my mother's hands. My stomach twisted. I hadn't touched the laundry in over a week. I called Marilyn immediately. "Did you come into my apartment today?" She answered without hesitation. "Of course. Your hamper was overflowing. I couldn't leave it like that. You can't just come in whenever you feel like it. Jennifer, don't be dramatic. You were at work. It's not like you were using the place." That sentence, "it's not like you were using the place," struck harder than I expected. As though my home only counted as mine if I was physically standing in it. As though my autonomy existed only when it was convenient for her. A few days later, I discovered my fridge reorganized and packed with groceries I'd never bought. Healthy meals, chopped vegetables, neatly arranged containers. Most people would call it thoughtful. To me, it felt like being smothered. And then came Lily. One morning, I walked into my bathroom and spotted a bottle of expensive purple shampoo on the shelf. Definitely not mine. Lily used that brand. I called her, voice tight. Did you stay at my place last night? A pause. Yeah. Mom said it was fine. I had a late shift and didn't want to drive home. She doesn't live here. You should have asked me. Well, you weren't home. Why does it matter? There it was again, the casual disregard my mother had perfected. My space, my consent, my comfort, they meant nothing. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house, determined to get my key back. But the moment I stepped inside and smelled pot roast simmering, heard dishes clinking, I slid right back into old habits, guilt, compliance, silence. Marilyn played the victim. Edward called me paranoid. Lily wouldn't meet my eyes. I left with nothing resolved, only a tightening in my chest that felt dangerously close to hopelessness. Still, I tried again. I changed the locks. Told myself this time it would stick. 2 quiet weeks passed, almost peaceful. I let myself believe they had finally understood. But hope doesn't survive long with people who refuse to see you. One Thursday evening, I opened my apartment door and froze. Sitting on my couch, relaxed, unbothered, sipping tea like it was her own living room, was Marilyn. She lifted a shiny new key with a proud smile, as though she were presenting me with a gift. I spoke to your landlord, she announced. He gave me a spare. I need to be able to get in if something happens. Something in me didn't snap loudly, it fractured softly, like thin ice giving under too much strain. I replaced the locks again. But this time, it wasn't just the metal that changed. Something inside me shifted, too. I thought nothing they did could catch me off guard anymore. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the landlord incident, I came home and noticed my living room window was cracked open. A breeze lifted the curtains gently. The window screen lay on the floor, bent, as if someone had shoved it out of the way in a rush. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it fell. Maybe the wind was strong. Maybe, anything but the truth tightening in my chest. Then I saw the casserole on the kitchen counter, still warm beneath the foil. A sticky note on top read, in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. You're not eating enough. My stomach sank. There was only one possible explanation. I called Marilyn, my voice trembling. Did you climb through my window? Silence. Then a scoff, indignant. Well, your door was locked. How else was I supposed to get in? I made dinner. You scaled a trellis to break into my apartment. Jennifer, stop being dramatic. If you quit changing the locks like a rebellious teenager, I wouldn't need to. I pressed my hand to my forehead. This is illegal. This is called being a mother, she corrected. When I phoned Edward, hoping he might see reason, he sighed heavily, like I was the problem. She worries about you. Just give us a key. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I hung up before fury turned into something I couldn't take back. At that point, it wasn't about casseroles or laundry or even the key. It was about entitlement, how they felt they had unrestricted ownership over my life, my home, my autonomy. That night, lying awake with every door locked and every curtain pulled tight, a frightening truth settled over me. I could change the locks 1,000 times and they'd still find a way inside. A sympathetic landlord. A window. A trellis. As long as they knew where I lived, they would keep invading. The only way to reclaim my peace was to disappear. The next morning, I toured a high-rise in the Pearl District. A modern building with controlled entry and a doorman named Victor who checked every guest and package with military precision. The place radiated one thing I desperately needed, safety. I signed the lease that same afternoon. For 2 weeks, I packed quietly. No social media posts, no noisy moving truck, just Sophie and Rachel carrying boxes down the stairs, whispering encouragement like they were escorting me through an escape route I should have taken years earlier. By the time the sun dipped behind the buildings, the apartment was empty. I wiped the counters, shut off the lights, and stood in the doorway one final time. I didn't feel sad. Or nostalgic. Just finished. I dropped the keys in the landlord's mailbox and walked away without turning back. They thought they could walk into my life whenever they chose. Soon, they would learn what it felt like when I finally walked out of theirs. During the first 2 days after I moved, my phone buzzed non-stop, missed calls, texts, voicemails. At first, they were pretending everything was normal. "How's your day? Call us when you have a minute." By the third day, the messages turned tense, clipped. "Jennifer, answer your mother. This isn't amusing. Call us immediately." I stayed silent. Silence, I realized, was the one boundary they couldn't bulldoze. On the fourth day, everything went quiet. My phone sat still on the counter of my new kitchen, an island of calm in a world that had felt suffocating. I made tea. Unpacked boxes. Sorted books in the way I liked, without anyone shifting them afterward. Victor greeted me every afternoon in the lobby with a polite, "Good day, miss," offering exactly the distance my parents never respected. For the first time in months, I felt like my lungs could actually expand. But peace never lasts forever. On the 6th day, my phone exploded with 20 missed calls in rapid succession. My stomach knotted. I still didn't answer. Then another voicemail arrived, and the preview flashed on my screen. "Jennifer, your apartment, everything's gone. Where are you?" They were at the old place. I stepped to the window, gripping my phone until my knuckles blanched. I pictured it, the empty rooms, the bare walls, the stripped shelves. My parents standing in shock, face to face with the consequences of their own behavior. Another voicemail followed. Marilyn's voice high and panicked. "Oh God, Jennifer, were you taken? Your things are gone. The apartment is empty. Please, sweetheart, please call us." I closed my eyes. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, exactly. But something had shifted: power, balance, control. I waited another day. Then one more. Finally, on the third day, I called them back. Marilyn answered so fast I barely heard the ring. "Jennifer. Where are you? What is happening? We went to your apartment and it was completely empty. Do you understand me? Empty." I kept my voice calm. "Why were you at my apartment?" The silence on her end crackled like static. Edward's voice cut into the line, sharp and accusing. "We hadn't heard from you in days. We were worried. We had every right to check on you." Quietly, I answered, "No. You didn't." Marilyn jumped back in, frantic and breathless. "Jennifer, stop this. Tell us where you are. Right now." "No." The single syllable dropped like ice between us. "No?" she echoed, stunned, as if the word simply didn't apply to her universe. "No," I repeated. "You don't get to know where I live." Edward sucked in a harsh breath. "Excuse me? You heard what I said." "This is absurd," he snapped. "We're your parents. And you treated my home like your personal space," I replied. "You came and went whenever you wanted. You rearranged my belongings. You let Lily sleep there without asking. You got a new key behind my back. And Mom climbed up a trellis." "A trellis, Dad?" Marilyn let out a small gasp. "That was one time. That one time should never have happened." Silence followed. Not the angry kind. Not dramatic. A quieter silence, the kind that meant something had finally, truly sunk in. I kept going. "You weren't worried about me. You were worried about not being able to control me. Those are very different things." "That's not fair," Edward muttered. "Fair?" I repeated. Fair would have been respecting my boundaries. Fair would have been treating me like an adult. Fair would have been listening the first time I said no. You didn't. So now I'm doing what I have to. Marilyn's voice trembled. Jennifer, please just tell us you're safe. Please. I haven't slept, I can't eat, I'm sick over this. Her familiar guilt spirals, the emotional weight she always used to pull me back into line, rolled over me, and finally, they didn't stick. I'm safe, I said. Because I'm away from you. She sobbed. Then Edward, barely audible, whispered something I never expected. I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. I swallowed. You didn't want to see it. For a long stretch, no one said a word. They were absorbing something uncomfortable, something undeniable. I wasn't the same daughter they could push past. The door they used to walk through freely was closed now. Marilyn sniffed. Jennifer, please. Can we talk? Face to face? We can meet in a public place, I said. A cafe, somewhere neutral. No more coming to my home. Ever. You don't trust us, she whispered. I don't trust your boundaries, I said simply, because you don't have any. Another silence. This one softer. Less combative. More accepting. Finally, Marilyn murmured, okay. The word didn't erase the past, but something inside me loosened. It was acknowledgement, a start. Good, I said. I'll text the time and place. We'll talk then. But your address, Edward began, one last attempt to hold on to the old dynamic. Shouldn't we know where you live, in case? No, I said firmly. You will not have a key to my home. You will not have access to my home. My home is mine. He let out a slow breath. All right. And with that, the power shifted completely, not through shouting or slammed doors, but through quiet certainty. After ending the call, I set my phone down and looked around my new space. The soft glow of evening light stretched across the floor. The city murmured below. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. The air belonged solely to me. My silence wasn't avoidance. It was protection. For the first time, my life felt whole, sealed, and firmly mine. 3 days later, we met at a cozy cafe downtown, a warm place with wide tables and dim lighting that invited honest conversation. I arrived early and chose a seat by the window, wanting to see them come in. My hands were steady. My breath was calm. I felt grounded. When Marilyn and Edward entered, they looked smaller than I remembered, tired, unsure, stripped of their old certainty. Marilyn paused before sitting, as if waiting for permission that had never mattered to her before. We talked quietly at first. No yelling. No dramatic tears. Just cautious words and long pauses. Marilyn admitted she hadn't understood how suffocating her behavior was. Edward said he thought he was protecting me, not realizing he was clinging to a version of me that no longer existed. I didn't rush to comfort them. I didn't smooth over the tension. I simply spoke plainly. For us to have any kind of relationship, we need boundaries. They nodded. Slowly. Hesitantly. But truthfully. We set clear rules. Public meetups for now. No surprise visits. No keys. No more entering my home without permission. Respect must run both ways. Trust must be rebuilt, not assumed. When we stood to leave, Marilyn hugged me gently, as though she finally understood I was not something she could grip tightly without consequence. Edward whispered, "We'll try." And for once, I believed him. I walked back to my new apartment feeling lighter than I had in years. The lobby was quiet. Victor greeted me with his usual polite nod. And as I closed the door behind me, locking it with keys that belonged only to me, I understood something simple but powerful. Peace isn't something you stumble into. It's something you defend. For most of my life, I thought love meant allowing anything, even when it hurt. Now I know that love without limits isn't love, it's possession. By stepping away, I made space for something healthier, to grow with them, and within myself. If you've ever had to fight for your own peace, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments, and subscribe for more real-life family stories. Sometimes disappearing isn't running away. It's choosing yourself at last.